briefing by the President on efforts that government is undertaking to recover the economy of the South Africa and to recover it quickly and recover it sustainably. We have the President of the Republic who is going to address you shortly, but we are also joined by the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Minister Gwede Mantashe, with us. My name is Khumbuzo Nchabeni, the Acting Minister in the Presidency, and I'll be the facilitator of this engagement. At this moment, I'd like to invite the President for his address. Mr. President, over to you.
Thank you, Minister. Once again, let's apologize for the delay in getting this briefing started. We are holding this briefing today during a time of great hope and also a time of great difficulty. Difficulty because we are in the midst of the worst economic crisis in our country's recent history, which has seen a dramatic increase in unemployment and hunger and a significant decline in economic growth. We're also in a time of hope because we are already starting to see the results of our efforts to recover and to rebuild. In the GDP figures released by Stats SA this week, there are encouraging signs of a revival in many sectors of our economy. And there's also encouraging signs of rising business confidence. We are indeed seeing the green shoots that are emerging after a devastating fire. We're witnessing, as I predicted in the State of the Nation address only a few months ago, the rebirth of our resilient fynbos. The economic impact of the coronavirus pandemic has been severe, not only for South Africa, but for the global economy. As a country, however, our challenges predate the pandemic. We have experienced low economic growth and high levels of unemployment for many years. And this has been due to the structural constraints that hold our economy back. There's no doubt that the prospect of a continued energy shortfall and further load shedding presents a massive risk to our economy. That is why we have identified the achievement of energy security as one of the priority interventions in our economic reconstruction and recovery plan. Our ability to address the energy crisis swiftly and comprehensively will determine the pace of our economic recovery. We know that resolving the energy supply shortfall and reducing the risk of load shedding is our single most important objective in reviving economic growth, because there is no economy that can really grow substantially without energy security. In the past weeks and months, we have made some important progress in addressing the energy crisis under the leadership of the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy. This includes the announcement of 11 successful bidders for the Risk Mitigation Power Procurement Program and the opening of bid window 5 of the Renewable Energy Program to procure 2,600 megawatts of new generation capacity from a number of sources, from wind, solar, PV projects. Escom is working hard to improve the performance of its existing fleet of power stations, despite all the challenges that it is currently addressing. It is also working hard to reduce the debt burden and complete its restructuring process. While these steps are positive and necessary, they are not enough to address the immediate and significant energy shortfall that threatens our economic recovery. We know that to confront the energy challenge will require bold and urgent action, not yesterday, but now. Incremental measures will not be sufficient to meet the scale of this challenge. We also know that in responding to any crisis, we must remain agile and we must be willing to adapt our interventions to match the circumstances that we face. The interventions that we planned yesterday may not be sufficient to meet our needs today. For this reason, we are today announcing a significant new step in further reforming our electricity sector towards achieving a stable and secure supply of energy. Following an extensive public consultation process and discussions within our own ranks in government and discussions between the Minister of Minerals, Energy and myself, and also a significant amount of technical work undertaken by the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy, we will be amending Schedule 2 of the Electricity Regulation Act to increase the NERSA licensing threshold for embedded generation projects from 1 megawatt to 100 megawatts. This intervention reflects our determination to take the necessary action to achieve energy security and to reduce the impact of load shedding on businesses and households across the country. There is evidence of our intention that we are putting forward today to tackle this economic crisis head-on by implementing major economic reforms that will transform our economy moving forward. It also demonstrates our commitment as government to listen carefully to experts, to engage closely with our social partners, and to take on board new ideas to address our long-standing challenges. This measure will be crucial in developing a response to the energy crisis that is ambitious enough, bold enough, and urgent enough. The amended regulations will exempt generation projects up to 100 megawatts in size from the NERSA licensing requirement, whether or not they are connected to the grid. This will remove a significant obstacle to investment in embedded generation projects. Generators will also be allowed to wheel electricity through the transmission grid, subject to wheeling charges and connection agreements with Escom and relevant municipalities. However, generation projects will still need to obtain permits, a grid connection permit, to ensure that they meet all the requirements for grid compliance. This will ensure that we are able to bring online as much new capacity as possible without compromising the integrity and stability of our energy system. Generation projects will also need to have their registration approved by NERSA to verify that they have met these requirements and to receive authorization to operate. And this will all be done within a set time frame where projects do not wait for years and years. Municipalities will have discretion to approve grid connection applications in their networks based on an assessment of the impact on their grid. They will also have to undertake an environmental impact assessment and all other requirements of existing legislation. This will ensure that while we enable as much new generation capacity as possible to come online, we also will be ensuring the orderly development of the energy system that is regulated, yes, by NERSA and overseen by our Department of Minerals and Energy. This reform is expected to unlock significant investment in new generation capacity in the short and medium term, and it will enable companies to build their own generation facilities to supply their energy needs. This in turn will increase the availability of supply of energy and reduce the burden on Escom, allowing Escom to proceed with its intensive maintenance program and to reduce its reliance on expensive gas and diesel turbines. The final version of the amendment to Schedule 2 will be published by the Department of Minerals and Energy within the next 60 days or even sooner. We are faced with the significant challenge of achieving a swift and lasting economic recovery following many years of economic decline. This government has the task of building a new economy in the wake of a global pandemic and of placing our country on a strong footing for the next decade and beyond. While the challenges we face are steep, our starting point must be to acknowledge the severity of the crisis. If we recognize the challenge, if we understand its root causes, we can fund and implement solutions. Many funders are willing to come to the fore to fund the energy solutions that we can put forward. We are a country that is blessed with tremendous resources and resourcefulness. We have a bright future ahead of us. We just need to manage our way out of the crisis that we're facing. Today's announcement takes us one significant step further towards that future. I would like to thank Minister Mantashe and his team for working tirelessly to secure our energy supply and to forge a modern, forward-looking and sustainable energy system for our country. I'd also like to thank the Vulindlela team that operates, guided by the Deputy Minister of Finance and also the officials in my office. I think we've started a number of steps to move forward to the economic recovery that we've been talking about. Many more announcements will be coming forward as we take one step at a time to move towards recovery. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, Mr. President. They have taken the controls from me, so I have to allow them to give me the right. Mr. President, thank you for the address. And ladies and gentlemen, we'll now take questions from you. If we can have your questions by show of hands, and then I'll call your names so that we can have, they can unmute you and we are able to follow, to have you answering the questions. Can I have an indication by show of hands who? I'm not seeing any hands.
I doubt if there are any questions, Minister.
I'm trying to make sure that I'm not accused. This morning, we were accused for muting the questions when the questions do not reach us. So I don't want to disadvantage South Africans to have the questions. There's Xolani Mbanjwa at Newsroom Africa who has a question. Can we have Xolani Mbanjwa being unmuted?
Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you very much, Mr. President. The question that I have for the President is on another new deal that South Africa has supposedly wanted to actually get into when it comes to the power ships deal, generating power through the power ships. Minister Mantashe is on this call, and there are latest, news that's coming out from environmental lobby groups who are unhappy about South Africa signing this deal without thoroughly going through the environmental checks. And there have been questions about alleged corruption leading to this particular power ship deal. This deal has been touted as something that's going to alleviate energy crisis in the country. What is the President's view about some of the concerns, environmental and allegations of corruption that are linked to this particular deal? Is something going to be done to investigate or halt this particular deal from going ahead? Thank you.
I'll also take a question from Leabo Setu of the SABC. There's Carol Payton as number 2 after Leabo Setu. There's Antoinette Slabert as number 3 after Carol Payton. And there's Denver, there's no indication of the surname, as number 4. And there's Kaya Sitole as number 5. And then after that round, we'll take another round. Thank you. In that order, please, let's start with Leabo Setu.
Thank you, Minister. Mr. President, thank you very much for the announcement. This announcement that you have made is effectively, I see that you've given the industry and a bonus of an extra 90 megawatts when they've effectively had been calling for 10 megawatts from the initial 1 megawatt that you have been given where they can generate their own electricity. However, you have not given us an indication about what is the future of Escom in this case. It is still an important and significant player. And having 14 years, Mr. President, of load shedding, ravaging the economy and the lives of South Africans has really been devastating to the economy, as you also said. But what is the plan from government with regards to Escom? How is this entity going to be helped in order for it to execute its mandate of providing electricity to South Africans? Thank you.
Carol Payton.
You need to unmute me.
You are unmuted, Carol.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I was waiting to be unmuted. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to ask 2 things. One is, will companies that now are now have a freer hand to build these independent power projects, will they be able to sell to other parties? Would they be able to sell electricity to other parties? And then secondly, on the municipalities, if you could just clarify, I didn't quite get exactly what you said around municipalities. Is that a change, or is that a change to the existing regime, or is that the same? Thanks very much.
May Carol be followed by Antoinette Slabert.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. Thank you so much for your announcement. I just want to ask, you talk about responding to a changing environment, and I want to link that to the Integrated Resource Plan, which is our master plan for energy planning. and it is completely outdated. It underestimates the deficit in the supply. It still talks about technologies that like new coal that is difficult to fund these days. Why don't, or is there any plan to urgently update that basic document? Thank you.
Thank you. May we have David?
Yes, thanks indeed. It's Devin Morgan from ENCA. I wanted to find out, Mr. President, and perhaps the Minister of Energy, what is the time that the energy would be eventually available on the grid from supply to demand? If we factored that in, so how quick will that energy be available? Secondly, again, just to kick off from the previous question being posed, the expectation of the energy availability factor that's cited in the resource plan, it hasn't been going to plan. In other words, that that energy availability factor is actually decreased and not increased as we go along, as the plan envisaged, that coming out from Escom. So again, we're faced with the fact where we're below expectations according to the plan. How do you factor that in going forward? Because Escom is actually supplying lesser and lesser energy as envisaged. Thank you.
And lastly, on this round, can we have Mr. Kaya Story?
Thank you and good afternoon, Mr. President. Kaya from Power FM. Just a couple of questions. Obviously, historically, one of the reasons that has been cited, at least unofficially, for why these steps haven't been taken is the fact that Escom does indeed rely on some of the bigger users, whether it's the large power users, as essentially a guaranteed source of income. So in coming up with this decision, was this in collaboration with Escom acknowledging that there is indeed a possibility that some of its more reliable and more profitable customers may essentially go off grid? That is the first question. And the second one is, does the government have an idea of what they think the sum of the individuals or the entities that will take this up might be, and how that would then translate to Escom having greater capacity? Because if at the end of the day, all you're releasing from Escom is 100 megabytes, will still be stuck in stages of load shedding. Thank you.
Thank you for those questions. Mr. President, I'll hand back to you with a response, and then you will invite Minister Mantashe when you feel that he must respond to specific questions. Thank you. Over to you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you for those who've asked questions. The question of these these power ships, rather, and the questions and the issues that are being raised by environmental groupings, these are matters that we need to pay attention to. We have a number of stakeholders who we work with, who we consult on an ongoing basis, and on a matter like this, we do need to consult them, we need to interact with them, and be able to hear their concerns, get their views, and learn from their own wisdom. So I would be encouraging our department that we need to pay keen attention to the issues and the concerns that are being raised, be they of an environmental nature or the manner in which the transaction is being envisaged. My full understanding is that this is still in process. It's by no means done. It's still in process, and there are quite a number of issues that still need to be examined and studied carefully before any conclusion is fully finalized. And I will, at the end, allow Minister Mantashe to make some comments on this, be it on the issue of the environmental issues or on allegations of corruption. And of course, your question, Kolani, is whether we will investigate all these matters? Of course, yes. We are determined that everything that government does on behalf of our people should be transparent, should be open, and should be free of any malfeasance. And if there is any sign of malfeasance, we must nip it in the bud. We must be able to give cogent explanations on anything that government does for the people of our country. Liabo, what is the future of Escom? Well, the future of Escom is precisely what we've been working on for the past few years. Escom, we've all acknowledged, has been going through rather really difficult times. And these difficult times emanate way back. In the past, management of Escom had wanted to keep up with the times of the energy need that they saw coming. And they wanted to replace some of the power stations at the time. And it was thought that maybe the economy will not have grown exponentially, and they were held back. But at the same time, they were told that keep the lights on, and that led to a lot of maintenance not being properly done or done at all. In later years, it was felt that we actually need to revisit that decision that had been made and embark on new build capacity. And that is why we then embarked on the new build of the new power stations. And by that time, a number of the internal experts, the internal capacity, in terms of human capital, had either left, retired, or gone elsewhere. And yes, new capacity kept coming in, which was really good, because those who came in were also largely Black people who had been held out of these types of companies for a long time. And as that new capacity got built, it became more and more expensive, and a huge debt burden was then built up. Now, your question is, what is the future of Escom? Escom has a future in our country, and to give it that future, we decided that we should divide it into 3 entities, like many other electricity or energy companies are doing around the world, that are held by government, so that we can lighten the debt burden on the entire enterprise by separating generation, transmission, and distribution, and having focused management under Escom Holdings. And that is what is now in process. So the future of Escom is such that it will be into 3 entities. And on the generation side, it's always good to have competition. That is what is happening in other countries that we've looked at and studied. Even in a country like China, they have a number of generators that compete, give consumers price competitive offerings, efficiency is enhanced, and every generator is then kept on their toes to make sure that they offer the best service. But Escom is their biggest generator in our country with 45,000 megawatts. For anybody to build up that capacity will take easily 30 to 50 years in my book. So Escom will continue as a generator of our energy, continue playing a key and central role. But right now, because of the challenges that Escom is going through, we need to ease that pressure on Escom and allow other generators to come to the fore. Our IPP program has proven one of the best in the world, because much as it is by the nature of renewables are intermittent power. They're able to make contributions to our grid at critical moments. And while Escom retains the base load generation of energy that the country needs. So what we need to do is to strengthen Escom, to enable Escom to get out of its woes right now, and to enable us as government to continue, yes, to support Escom. The transmission part will always, it's a national treasure. It'll always be held by government. Generation, there will be other players. And the distribution is divided between Escom and your local government entities throughout the country. So once Escom is divided into the three entities, we will then be able to have a much sleeker Escom, a much more focused Escom, and which has great human capital that will be able to increase the efficiency that Escom should have in generating our energy in our country. And we will continue to support Escom. We have already said repeatedly that Escom is just too big to fail in the hands of government, and we're not going to allow Escom to fail because it holds the economy of our country in its hands, in its transmission lines and its power stations. Carol wants to know whether companies will be able to sell their energy. Yes, they will be able to sell. They'll generate for themselves. They'll also be able to sell to others, their neighbors and all that. And once they get to that high level, either 50 megawatts, 100 megawatts, they may well find that we don't need all that energy, so therefore we need to sell and put it into the grid. For that to happen, as I said in my initial input, there needs to be a permit. There needs to be properly approved. And that is where the regulator comes in. The regulator has to examine all those. But we are also saying that we would like that to be done in a time-efficient manner. It should not be taking years and years. In fact, it should just be taking very, very short and limited time. We cannot wait to inject growth in our economy for years. We just need a permitting system that is going to move very quickly, and these elongated bureaucratic processes must come to an end because we need to create jobs. We cannot have processes going on forever and in a day. So yes, they'll be able. With municipalities, because what we need to understand is that these power generators or generator projects take place in local municipality environments. They don't take place at the union buildings, they are in the local municipality. So the regulatory process has to involve the Department of Mineral and Energy Resources, it will have to involve NERSA, it will also include and involve local municipalities. So local municipalities are going to play a critical role. They will play the role that will be clearly delineated and determined either as distributors or in any shape or form. And the efficacy of the power that will be generated at that level has to be such that it meets all the standards. And that is why it will be overseen by NERSA, it will be registered with the Department of Mineral Energy, and the local government will also play their role. Now, this is all new. This is all new for all of us. We've been talking about this for quite a while. This is all new, and we will traverse this path with the care and the efficiency that it's required. There may well be problems and challenges as we move on in terms of how local government will be able to play their role, but we will address those as we move on. The important thing is that we've got to ensure that there is energy that is generated to grow the economy of our country. Antoinette says we are in a changing environment, and that is so true. Is the IRP not outdated? The IRP is a living document. And the minister can comment on that as well. It's a living document. It's not a static document. It has to be responding to the times that we live in. As the environment changes, as technologies change, as processes change, and as the investment climate also changes, the IRP has to respond. Right now, we are finding around the world that many financiers, be they developmental funding institutions or major banks or major funders, even here in our own locale, South Africa, they're beginning to shy away from fossil fuel projects. They want more and more renewables. Now, we've always said that as South Africa, our approach is that of a mixed energy source or resource. That's how we've proceeded. And as the environment changes and as technologies change, as financing availability change, we've got to look at our IRP and renew it. And this IRP, by the way, has been renewed a couple of times, and it will continue being renewed. And the minister and his department are already looking at that. Devon asks, how quick will the energy be available? Given that the EAF, the energy availability factor, keeps decreasing. And obviously, we would like those who are interested to participate in this offering to get up and going as quickly as possible. And of course, the department has already been approached by a number of would-be project initiators. And some of those project initiators are not necessarily the operating enterprises themselves, either manufacturers or mines or whatever, because generating energy is not their core business. So there are other entities that are willing to come into the breach and give them the energy source that they need. And they tend to be very ambitious. They tend to be very bold. They want to invest and invest quickly. And what we are seeking to do is to create that environment that will enable them to invest as quickly as possible. And our message to them is, will be, come and invest. We've created an environment which is conducive for you to come and invest. And what has been pleasing for me is to hear business organizations, Business Unity South Africa, Black Business Council, business leadership, and so on. Many of them saying, we need to open up the energy space. And what that tells me is that they know something I don't know. They may well be investors who are keen. And we're now opening the way and the path for them to come and invest as quickly as possible. Now, with the permit processes that we are now reforming, that should mean that the energy creation or generation should be much quicker, and the ministry and the department are already looking at a number of interesting projects. Kaya asked two questions. I did not catch wind of the last part of his question. I only heard him talk about Escom. Has Escom been consulted? Yes, Escom has been very much a part of this whole equation, and they have, in their consideration of this process and option, have said that, yes, they are very keen that the level should be raised even beyond the 10 megawatt, because they see this as being important to ease the pressure on them to be, as Escom, to be able to get on much more easily to be able to maintain, to be able to get on with their build processes, because they are doing two things at one go. They have to continue generating energy, and they have to maintain. And somewhere along the line, and that's why we sometimes have these blackouts, load shedding, something has to give, because you are maintaining. It's like maintaining a car that you have not really serviced for a long period, but you expect it to travel long journeys. And you then have to maintain it as you're traveling. Sometimes it's very difficult, almost impossible. So that's why Escom is quite welcoming to this direction that we are taking. I didn't catch wind of the second part of Kaya's question. Thank you very much, Minister.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll get Kaya to write to us the second part, because I could not get it either. I do not know if Minister Mantashe would want to add in what the President has just explained. Minister Mantashe.
Okay. This is the President's media briefing. I don't want to make it mine. I don't want to do that. But let me deal with the first question of the car power ship deal. Environmental consideration, the allegations of corruption. Actually, we don't have a car power ship deal. We have a deal for 11 producers who are required to give us emergency energy. Among them, there is car power ship deal. It has attracted attention for two reasons. One, it is not the normal renewables. It is more based on gas. Number two, and therefore that's why it's attracting the attention of environmentalists. On the question of the allegation of corruption, I'm sure they should be investigated. But all I would caution against is that if every person who loses a deal must go to court for and make allegations, then we're going to be in trouble. But they must be investigated. That is all there. Number two, on the IRP being outdated, Antoinette, you know, government develop policies. They take a long time. You know, the IRP 2019 has been on the making from 2012, 2010. We accelerated it. We had it in 2019. If it's totally outdated, we must start something new. I'm sure by the time we finish that one, it will be outdated. We'll need something new. But the reality of the matter is that people must read the IRP. You know, the IRP is talking of 11,813 megawatts. Of those, just over 6,000 are from renewables. But still, the criticism is that we're not moving fast enough. You know, gas is given 3,000, for example. There is a provision for 1,500 for coal. And people say, why coal in this stage? And I'm saying, we need the 1,500 to experiment with new technologies, cleaner technologies of coal. It's a resource we have as a country. So if it is outdated and the government says so, we'll revisit it. But as it goes, because policy development is always in a state of becoming, is never static. So we understand that. Lastly, what will it take for energy to reach the consumer? I want to put a little bit of a break on this belief that the president has made an announcement today. There will be no load shedding tomorrow. I think it doesn't work that way. The new capacity that will have to be built, people will have to build the facility. It will take its own time. It will take time. It will come to this grid at different times and different stages. That's why bid window 4, which was allowed in 2018, is only 1,200 on the grid. 1,000 is still not on the grid. We're expecting to come on the grid in December. And that is nothing abnormal about that. Is because there's a build program and then connection and all those. Nothing to do with licensing. But We must not create an impression that will create a revolt tomorrow. That the president will make an announcement today, tomorrow there will be no load shedding. No, it won't work. Thank you.
Mr. Mantashe, we are fully aware that it's the president's briefing, but you needed to provide the clarity that you have just done. Mr. President, I've requested Mr. Kayas Tole to give us in writing the last part of his question. When he has done so, I will repeat it for you to can address when you address the next round of question, which is our last round of question. We'll take Ms. Fifi Peters of CNBC Africa as the number 1, followed by Paul Vechato of Bloomberg as number 2, and then followed by Ms. Lamazi Omaji of Fin24 as number 3, and Mr. Joseph Koterli of Financial Times as number 4. And that's our last question. And then we'll then repeat the question before you take over of Mr. Sithole. Over to you, Ms. Peters.
Thank you, Minister. And thank you, Mr. President, for the invite to this briefing. Sir, can we pivot to the telecommunications sector, where policy uncertainty there is also seen as a constraint on investment, sir, given the deadlock around the spectrum rollout currently at play? So I'd like to know when we can expect progress on that front. And just on a lighter note, in reference to the South African economy and a recovery that is seemingly running ahead of expectations, I'd like to understand how this government plans on taking advantage of that faster than expected recovery outside of the announcements that you have made regarding energy. So thank you.
Hi, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, we can hear you, Paul.
All right, hi. Good afternoon, Mr. President and ministers. I think you partially answered my first question on, does this mean the beginning of the privatization of power generation in South Africa? My second question is, how many projects and what's the estimated value of projects that are lined up to take to apply for licenses for the 100 megawatt generation and below? And then finally, how soon do you expect the first licenses to be awarded and us to see the first of these IPPs come online? Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Lamise from Fin24. I think it's great news that the threshold has been lifted to 100 megawatts. Can we maybe just get an explanation of why it's sort of exceeded what, for example, the Minerals Council has asked for of 50 megawatts? And then the second question is about whether there is an industrial policy to support this change. I think there might be a fear that we'll have solar panels imported as opposed to having them sourced and produced locally. Thanks.
Joseph?
Yes, it's Joseph Kostrel of the Financial Times. I just wanted to ask, is there any concern that this might increase what's been called the death spiral for Escom? I know, Mr. President, you said that Escom supports this move, but lots of people will be worried that mining companies, smelters, other big businesses will see this as an opportunity to leave Escom behind, and that will mean Escom doesn't have customers or revenues in the future. Was that death spiral debate discussed as part of this move? Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. The second question from Mr. Kayas Tole is do we have an idea of how much capacity this will free up from Escom once all qualifying entities are able to generate their own electricity up to 100 megawatts? Thank you. When you are ready, Mr. President, you can then start responding.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Minister. Thank you. Starting off with Fifi's question. about the dispute in the telecom space, how soon and how quickly that could be resolved. As you well know, Fifi, we live in a country that's not only governed by democratic principles, but by the rule of law. The players in that field, as indeed in any other field, can always approach our courts to adjudicate whatever dispute that they may have. And so that has ensued. Last week, you will recall, I made a call to the role players in the telecom space to resolve the disputes that they have and have the disputes mediated upon so that we do not have legal suits holding the country's progressive movement forward in terms of economic recovery and reconstruction being held hostage. I am hoping that the telecommunications companies will find it in their own interests to subject themselves to a mediation process. We would be very supportive of that type of mediation process, and I'm sure that ICASA, which is the regulator, will also actively participate, as will the Department of Communications also actively participate in helping to mediate this dispute so that it's resolved. So I would like to see it happening sooner rather than later, because the spectrum process is one of those initiatives that is just going to unlock a lot of economic energy in our country and enable our economy to also grow in a way that we are already beginning to see. So I'd like to see that resolved, and I'm hoping that the calls that we keep making to the players will bear fruit, and I am sure they will bear fruit. And how will we take advantage of the signs that we are seeing now of an economic recovery? We are doing everything we can. We are unlocking all blockages. We are moving ahead with our reforms, as you had us take this step. There are a few others that we're working on. The departments in our government, as well as Operation Vulindlela and staff members in the presidency, are working together cooperatively, seeking to find solutions on each and every one of the reforms that we have identified. We have no doubt whatsoever that once those reforms are bedded down, including being able to move on with increasing the capacity of the state, particularly at local government level, where the capacity of the state has become hugely weakened. Once we can address that and get the entire country facing in the same direction of reforms, of making sure that the processes that government gets involved in, either as a regulator, either as a policy manager, are so well streamlined as to create a conducive climate in our economy. So we will be taking advantage, and in some cases, yes, we may even enter as an investor, even as government. There are quite a number of areas where we can play a key role as government. So we will be taking advantage of this. We are facing a period of hope, much as we are going through a great deal of challenges, but there is hope on the horizon, which we want to capture to good effect and inject growth in our economy. Paul from Bloomberg. Could this be, and I think his question could be tied up with Joseph, a question from the Financial Times. Paul wants to know, would this be a sign of privatization of power generation? And Joseph said, could this be the death spiral for Eskom? No, actually, the opposite is true. Eskom will continue to be owned by government, by the sovereign. And that is why we've decided and determined that the sovereign will continue to support Eskom, because it is just too big for us to allow it to fail. It generates 45,000 megawatts. And if you look at our continent, even some of the bigger economies do not even get up to 10,000 megawatts. And we are already at 45,000. And even with the best will in the world, even if those 100 megawatts could be generated, as I said earlier, it will take many years before we get to that point. But Eskom will continue to be the key generator. But at the same time, we've been encouraging Eskom to get into the renewable space itself. It's a power generator, and there is nothing that stops Eskom from getting into renewables. Eskom operates in the nuclear field. Eskom operates in the hydro field. We generate hydropower from Cahora Bassa in Mozambique, and that is hydro. So already it is in the mixed energy generation space. We also generate energy through gas and diesel, much as they are fossil fuels. So Eskom has a great future going forward. Right now, Eskom is caught up in a period where it is not able to move and steam ahead as we would like it to. And that is why Eskom is not opposed to what is being proposed now, because it will continue being a mega player. But Eskom also needs competition, and it knows that too. And competition is good in any economy, and it is good for consumers. So this is not a death spiral for Eskom. When Eskom is able to solve its current problems, it will research, but it will also be embracing the renewables. It has enormous experience. The human capital that is in Eskom, just right from the top to the bottom, even with ordinary workers, they know the system. The system, they operate the grid, they operate distribution and generation. So this is not the privatization of Eskom, by no means, no. And this is not the death spiral of Eskom, by no means, no. If anything, it could also be the rebirth of Eskom. And Eskom needs to shed a portion of its skin so that it can emerge as a new energy generator, and a process that it is already doing. I hope I answered the two questions. I think Lamez said, why did we go beyond the Minerals Council? In the mining sector level, there are already companies that want to generate more energy, and their ability to do so and their wish to do so is in part what has also motivated us to go beyond the 50 megawatts, because we did not want to do things on a piecemeal basis. The approaches have been made, and some have come forward with slightly more than 50 and saying, this is the needs that we have. And being able to do so means that to put it at 100 megawatts means that we're giving capability to those that can get up to that level. And certainly this should be seen as a great boon, really, even for the Minerals Council, because South Africa, in terms of our economy, will be a winner. Escom will also emerge a winner, much as some will argue that, well, we're taking bread out of Escom's mouth. No, we are not. We are adding capacity to Escom, because much as we may think it is going to lose the big power consumers, Escom is still in charge of the transmission. So when you want to transmit, there is a business therefore for Escom, but at the same time, you are just reducing that pressure on Escom as to enable Escom to increase its own capacity. And that equalizes itself, and it's an equation that we should see being able to be properly balanced. I wrote what Kaya said, but I don't know if I wrote correctly. How much capacity will this free to enable Escom to operate? I would not be able to know right now. It depends, Kaya, on those who will be interested to come forward. We may find that lots of companies will be, because putting up a power station, even of 10 megawatts, 100 megawatts, it's a pretty expensive business. So we must never think that, as Minister Mantashe said, it is going to end load shedding right now. It's not. It's a long-term, it's a longish process, but I would categorize it as being almost immediate term to medium term. So it will happen fairly more rapidly. The extent to which it will happen in terms of the number of megawatts, it's something that we will have to determine as we move on. But I think this introduces a new era in our energy source in our country. It's an era that we should all welcome, because it should boost economic confidence in our country, and it should get even your international investors to look at us afresh, including our own local investors. Because just talking to business people, first thing that they often say is that energy is the most important source or aspect of their decision to want to invest. And if there's no energy, then their decision in their boardrooms and management committees is just dampened. And as soon as we can give certainty of energy, they get up and going. And they say, this is a market that we want to invest in, we want to manufacture, we want to fashion products, we want to create jobs, and this gives them that oomph. And today, that is precisely what we are doing. We're giving an oomph to the economy of our country, and we're hoping that we will be able to do so in other areas as well, so that we increase the level of confidence in our economy. Thank you very much, Minister. Thank you to you all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. President. There's a specific question to Minister Mantashe to say, when can we expect the first permits to be issued by NERSA? I thought the President had indicated that the first regulations amendment will not exceed the 60 days, but Minister Mantashe, maybe clarify the matter before we close the session. Thank
you. The question that says, when will be the first license, requires an answer for another question. When will we receive the first application? Because that is what will determine when we issue a license. But as the President said, you know, let me say this, President, running the risk of being fired, you know. You know, when the president was twisting my arm to move to this direction, I ultimately agreed. I said to him, fine, President, if fine will accelerate the licensing, now is the permitting, to me is the same. It will take not more than 3 months at least, but we expect it to be much shorter. That's what we said. But what we also said, why 50? When we have 3 mining companies that have indicated one more than 50, 184 megawatt, 170 megawatt, another 100 megawatts. Why should we exclude mining companies? Let's go to 100. Now he's also bargaining, you know, with the president. If he moved to this direction, we must bargain for miners, you know. It's one portfolio. I agree. Thank you very much. That's it. I think the president has answered all the questions. I don't need to answer.
Thank you, Minister Mantashe. I think South Africans will remember that both yourself and the president are miners, are former miners. So the interest of the mining sector is very primary in the work that you do and in all your considerations. Mr. President, thank you for your time, for this interaction. It's always appreciated when you interact with South Africans through our media, more especially on matters of national interest and national importance. And we'll try to create more opportunities of this nature with your busy schedule, both for the country and the Republic and your international commitments. And Mr. Mantashe, thank you for being available to support this interaction. To the members of the media, thank you for always being responsive and also sticking to the script. And have a lovely day to all of you. And thank you to all South Africans. At least the energy problems of the country are getting resolved quicker than we all expected. Thank you, Mr. President.